Hello everyone, my name is Caitlin Daniel, host and creator of Sci-Fire Leadership, and if you're new here, welcome. I specialize in empowering leaders as they navigate how to best support mental health and well-being in our schools. Today's episode is going to be the first installment of a hopefully long-running series called Leading with Light, where once a month we're going to do a little bit of light reading together. This month, we're looking at The Body Keeps the Score, written in 2014 by Bessel van der Kolk. Now, even though this was written over 10 years ago, I still want to review it here on this channel because it is still being recommended today to practitioners, school leaders, educators, basically anyone that's interested in learning more about mental health. So, without further ado, we're going to take a deep dive into this book and give my final evaluation and ratings at the end. So, let's get started. Alright, so as I mentioned, today we're going to be looking at The Body Keeps the Score, The Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, written by Bessel van der Kolk. So this was published in 2014, like I mentioned in the intro, and a little bit about the book. So the author themselves is a leading expert and specialist, particularly on PTSD and trauma in the body. And in this book, they kind of walk through their 30-year career in research and connecting what they've learned with research and facilities and eyewitness accounts from patients who they've interacted with over those 30 years within their career, and they compile all of those into this book. Now the book is set up into 5 sections. One starts with kind of the history of trauma, specifically looking at PTSD. PTSD is a huge theme throughout this book. And then after that, it goes through how the mind and body are connected in responses to trauma. Then he does a chapter specifically on childhood trauma. The next section looks at the imprint of trauma on our bodies and our psyche as we age. And then the last one is recovering and healing from traumatic experiences. One thing I really like about this piece is that it's grounded in research and evidence. So they do have a lot of references throughout. You know, I love a good book with a lot of references. So, because I want to know where the author's coming from when they're making certain claims, especially regards to mental health, which is something that still needs to be studied, and many demographics still haven't been studied. And I feel like we're barely scratching the surface. So this book does do a great job at kind of giving the history of research around trauma. Like I said, since the author is an expert and a specialist in the field, they kind of go over their entire career and things they've learned during that time, and they also connect it to research that either they've done or their colleagues have done in the field. Another thing that I do like about this work is that it is full of patient accounts. So he does try to include people that he's worked with throughout his career, and kind of puts their story in a narrative form. That way you can get a glimpse into what that patient may be experiencing. Now, a huge caveat to that is a lot of the patient's views are told from his particular lens. So, as with anything an author writes, an author's lens is going to be biased. And so I don't really think that hearing directly from his accounts of what he was observing with people he was interacting with is necessarily a great indicator for how those individuals were feeling at that time and through those experiences that he talks about in this book. But I do think if you're a practitioner or someone that wants to dig into how trauma does impact the mind and body, because there is a connection and research does demonstrate that. So it's nice having a book that is dedicated to making that connection and providing it in a way that it is written for a practitioner, a clinician, or an average person like myself. So it does a really great job at doing that and kind of compartmentalizing all of the research and presenting it in a way that is easy to read, easy to understand, and kind of grasp at the root of what the author is trying to advocate for. Now, alongside that, the one downside to this book is that they mainly focus on PTSD. And while that is true that PTSD is rooted in trauma, because it's literally called post-traumatic stress, right? Or complex PTSD, I do like that trauma is presented in that lens. However, it is very PTSD focused. Like, it is solely PTSD focused. And if you are someone who has gone through trauma, this book needs a serious content warning put in front of it. It took me a while to get through this piece because I had to take breaks throughout, because it is filled with such heavy material and heavy descriptions of assault, mental illness, the operationalization of the hospitals, specifically hospitalization and psychiatric wards. And if you or someone you love has experienced those things, this will be a tough read. So as a leader, if you're looking at this text, because again, I still hear this one being recommended, someone just recommended it the other day, right? So I've been hearing this book being recommended for the last 10 years, but I only read it this year. And even though I'm in a good place on my healing journey, this book was still very, very heavy. So as a school leader, only pick up this book if you are ready to read through those passages, and be ready to also take breaks through them as well. Like I said, serious content warning needs to be put across this, because it can be re-traumatizing, because it brings up a lot of those memories, and if you're not ready fully to read it, I do not recommend reading this book. And also, as a school leader, you may be thinking that this book, since it's so highly recommended, might be a great book club or in-depth reading that you can do with yourself and your staff, that you can do with your leadership team or your staff. Just know that because there is such a heavy content warning, I would not advise doing that unless you give that warning beforehand, make sure everyone understands the scope of this book, and then also be ready to have resources that will support your leadership team and your school staff as they parse through this work. Other than that, though, this is a great book to read, because it does give you that scope. It gives you that kind of historical research context. However, remember, it is done, as always, through the author's lens, and that might hold their own biases with that as well. However, my final recommendation is going to be a 3 flames out of 5. And that concludes the first episode of Leading with Light series. If you liked this book review and you have more recommendations, please leave those in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more educational mental health content for school leadership, please subscribe to join this amazing community here on YouTube. We have videos releasing every Tuesday. Until next time, take care.